This is the second episode of the Alpine.js course, and I suggest that you have watched the first video and you are a bit familiar with Alpine.js. Today we will look at xbind, xmodal and x4 directives, and we will build this basic TODO application. It's a fully Alpine.js CRUD project. It means that we can create tasks, edit them by changing their state to completed, and delete them. And of course we can read them. Very simple app. For CSS styles I will use Bootstrap. So let's create a new index.html file. And also I will use a separate main.js file just for convenience. Then let's create a basic markup, and then let's add Bootstrap and Alpine.js to our index template. And also let's add our main.js file. Then I'm going to create a basic Bootstrap layout, so I need a container and a row devs. And also I need div with 10 Bootstrap columns width, centered by MX auto class with margin from top at 5 Bootstrap units and centered text. Let's create a container for our Alpine TODO app and add to it the xData attribute. But this time I want to use the data function as the value of the xData attribute. And this function will be called from the main.js file. Let's define the data function in it. And it will return an object. Then I'm going to define in this object the task key with some value. Now let's get to index.html, and inside this dev, let's create another dev container for an input field and a button. So let's say it'll be a div with a row and justify content center classes to align its content by center. And this row will have two child divs, two columns, one for the input field and another for a button. The width of the left column will be 6 Bootstrap columns, and the auto width for the right column. And now let's add an input field and a button. The input field will have a form control class, and the button will have btn and btn primary classes. Our form. And as you know, Alpine.js is a reactive framework. It means that if data are changed in one place, these changes will be immediately applied in all places where the data are used. To use data reactivity of Alpine.js, we have to use the xmodal directive. For example, we have here the task, example task. And now I want to show it with xtext directive. So let's create somewhere here a span tag, and I need the xtext directive, and let's say the value of the xtext attribute will be the task. Then let's add to the input tag the xmodal attribute. The xmodal will provide the reactivity of data. The value of the xmodal will be the task key. Let's look at it in the browser, and we can see that the data of the task key became reactive. We change it in the input field and it's immediately changed in the xData object. And it looks very cool. Okay, now let's delete the value of the task key. Here, the value will be just an empty string. And our next step is to create a task. It means that we have to create a handler for the event that will write tasks to an array, to a list. And also I want to show created task in a container below the form. Let's start with creating a task. First off, we need to store somewhere created tasks. For this purpose, I want to use just a JavaScript array. Let's create in the data object the tasks key. It will be an empty array. And don't forget commas here. And then I'm going to add the XOn directive to the button, and it will listen the click event. Its value will be the add task function. Or we can use just add character instead of the XOn. It's a shortcut for the XOn directive. And now we have to create the add task function in the data object. The logic of the add task function will be very simple. First of all, I want to check whether a user inputted something or not. The this keyword refers to this task key. If the input field has some value, the task key will get it immediately, as we saw a bit earlier. Then I want to append a new task to the tasks array. For these purposes, JavaScript arrays have the push method. And so I need this tasks, and I'm calling the push method. And in the tasks key, I want to add objects, dictionaries. And each dictionary will represent a task. So the dictionaries will have the title key. The value of the title key will be the value of the task key, this task. Then it will have the completed key with the default false value. And finally, I need some random number to use it as an ID. Usually we get data from the database and the objects have IDs generated by a database. So I want to use the math random function. The random function will generate numbers from 0 to 1. Okay, and finally I want to clean the input field by assigning to the task key an empty string as the value. And that's it, and let's change the xText value to tasks to see that everything is working or not working. Create objects. We can see that tasks get new objects. Okay, also I want to add to the input tag another XOn attribute. I want to listen keyup event and the modifier will be the enter. It means that I want to listen when the enter key will be released, and the handler will be also add task function. And we can see that if I press enter, we will create an object. Okay. And it's time to make a container to show tasks in it. I want to start with something simple. So let's add to the tasks key a couple of strings for a while. Then let's say we want to use in index template an unordered list, and each task will be an element in the list. So something here. And now we have to create a list item tag, li tag, for each task in the tasks list. To do it, we have to use the x4 directive. Let's add it to ul tag for a while. And the notation is like a for loop in Python. Nothing new here for you. For each task in a tasks list or array, we are doing something. we have to create last item tags, and the text of the task will be rendered by xText directive. Looks quite logical. Let's test it. And we can see that it doesn't work. To fix it, we have to use the template tag and wrap with it all elements we want to render. So let's remove the x4 definition from the UL tag, and let's create inside the UL tag the template tag, and add to it the x4 directive. Let's test it, and now we can see that it works. Now I want to add some Bootstrap styles to it. I want to wrap the UL tag with a div with a col 5, it's a width, margin from top 5, and it will be centered. To UL tag I want to add last group CSS class. Then let's add to the last item tag the last group item tag. It's a Bootstrap style for last items. And then I want last items contain a checkbox to mark a task as completed and a close button to delete the task. So I think that last item tag should have a child dev tag with a deflex, justify content between, and align items center CSS classes. Deflex adds flexboxes to the div, justify content between moves its content to its edges, and align items center aligns content vertically. And then this div will have two parts. The left part with a checkbox and a label, and the right part with a close button. Input field. The type of the input field will be checkbox. It will have form check input class, and the label will have form check label class. Then let's add to the label the xText attribute with a task as the value for a while task, and let's delete xText directive from the last item tag. Let's test it. Okay, and we can see our tasks. To keep checkboxes and its labels together, we have to wrap this input and label with a div with a form check CSS class. Okay, much better. And now I need a close button. Let's add the button as the sibling tag to the form check div. Button will have the btn close CSS class without a text. Okay. And now we can clean the tasks key from elements. Let's get rid of them. And let's test our form. Okay. Let's use here instead of the task title. Okay, creating works. Now I want to complete tasks by clicking on check boxes. And as you know, we can do it by using the xOn attribute. Let's add it to the input checkbox. xOn click. The value of the xOn attribute will be complete function, for example. And the complete function will take the task as an argument. And I want to format a bit our input tag. Now let's define the complete function in the data object. It takes task, and its logic is very simple. We just change the value of the completed attribute to the opposite, like we did in the previous video. So, task completed equals to not task completed. Okay. And then I want to add the line through CSS style if a task has its completed attribute equal to true. So let's add the style tag to the index template somewhere before the closing body tag style. Completed CSS style will be text decoration line through. And now we have to bind the CSS class of the label tag to the state of the completed key of a task object. And to do it, we can use the xbind directive. So let's add it to the label tag. Xbind dynamically set HTML attributes on an element. And I want dynamically add the completed CSS class to the label. So I set the colon and specify the attribute I want to change dynamically. It's the class attribute. And the value of the xbind attribute will be dictionary, an object, where the key is the CSS class I want to set. And the value of the key is a condition when it should happen. The condition should be evaluated to true or false. So in our case, it will be something like this. Completed CSS class, task completed. I want to set the completed CSS style if task completed is true, or we can use just colon class instead of the xbind. It's a shortcut to the xbind. So let's test it. It works. The next step. Now I want to rearrange tasks to show uncompleted tasks at the top of the list. And I'm going to use a basic sorting. And also I want to use a getter. Getters in Alpine.js are something like computed properties in Vue. It's a method that we can use as a property. So let's define one. Get, and then the name of the function. Let's say it'll be tasks sorted by completed. And it will return the result of the sort method. Return this. I need the tasks key, and I'm calling the sort method. The sort method accepts as an argument a callback function that will compare items of the array. It accepts two arguments. The first argument is the first item of the two it should compare, and the second argument is the second item. The sort method works by looping through each item in the array and comparing it to the next one. Based on some criteria we have to specify in our comparison function in the callback. If the callback function will return -1, the sorts will place the first item before the second. If the callback will return 1, the sort function will place the second argument before the first. 0 will leave them unchanged, and thus the sort methods will get an anonymous function that take two arguments, a and b, for example, a and b. And the returning value will be the difference between a completed property and the b completed property. As you know, Boolean values true and false in JavaScript, like in Python, are integers, and so the result of this comparing callback function always will be 1 or -1 or 0. Okay, we got this function, the sorting getter, and now I want to use it in the x4 directive instead of the tasks list. I need the template tag, and instead of the tasks, I put here the tasks sorted by completed getter. Let's test it. And we can see that sorting is working a bit, but it works wrong. We can see the very weird behavior. It's because Alpine.js doesn't understand on what list item we are clicking. We have to specify a criteria, a key on which it can rely on. So we have to use the key attribute with the x4 directive. x4 directive that in the template tag. And the key should be something unique. For these purposes, we created the ID key for each task. Task ID. Let's test it again. And we can see that sorting works. And the last thing we have to implement, deleting of tasks. As you know, we have to add a click handler to the close button. And the handler of the click event will be the delete task function, for example, that will accept the index of the task to delete. How to get an index of the element in the tasks list and the tasks array. So in the x4 attribute, I have to use parentheses and index as the second variable. And the index variable will get the index of the certain task in the tasks array. And that's it. Now let's define the delete task function. It gets an index. The delete task function will override the tasks array with a new one without the element we want to delete. So I need this tasks that equals to a new value, this tasks. And then I want to use the filter methods that will filter out the elements by specific criteria. The logic of the filter function is almost the same like the sort function. So it will take a callback function that will take two arguments. The first one is the element of the list of array, and the second one is its index. Task and task index. And then I want to compare the task index with the index we will get with the delete task call. If it's true, then the task will be removed from the tasks list. Return index not equal to task index. Let's test it. Okay, it works. I have a Telegram channel where you can find something useful or entertaining for you. If you like this Alpine.js tutorial, leave a like. If you have some questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment. Thanks for watching.